Well, welcome back to the Cottage Farmstead. We haven't met before. I'm Rebecca, and this is my husband, also known as Farmer Nathan. And this video almost didn't get filmed. I had forgotten to remind him that I wanted to film this project, and I looked out the window and saw him already working on the project. So I quick grabbed my camera and ran out here to talk about what we are working on at the homestead this week. So there are a couple different things that we have been brainstorming around the homestead here over the summer. First, our orchard that we planted last year has been getting nibbled on by the deer, and it's really just not thriving. So we were trying to think of how we wanted to exclude the deer from there. Do we need a big fence around where our orchard's going to be? Can we do it just around the trees? We tried the plastic tubes and it was really stunting the growth of our plants. So we were trying to come up with an idea of like, how can we start excluding the deer? Second, we are expecting our first baby pretty much any week now. And so we were trying to find ways to simplify a lot of our chores. So we were sitting around brainstorming about some of the things that we missed about how we managed our chickens at our old house. We lived in the suburbs, so we of course had a stationary coop, which meant our chickens were right next to the house. It was very easy to toss scraps to them. It was very easy to maintain having them so close to the house. So we were thinking of like, well, maybe we could move the chicken flock closer to the house, at least while we're in the newborn stage with the baby. But then we're like, well, we could kill two birds with one stone. We could put the chickens around the orchard area and put up the electric net, and that would help exclude the deer, and it would get the chickens closer to the house for maintaining them.
So here you can see the trees are well nibbled back. The deer have been really actively eating them, especially since we've had a dry summer. And these are tender greens. So this is basically going to be our first line of defense. It won't do much when the tree grows taller, but right here it'll prevent them from getting in, especially to the shoots that are lower on the tree, to hopefully just enable it to grow. I will be doubling this up as the tree grows, just to enable it to grow in a protected space. We also put cardboard down with some wood chips to help with keeping the weeds and maintenance of the area much easier. And since it's been so dry, we have to water a fraction of the amount throughout the summer just to help the trees survive throughout the heat. So we're all about reducing, reusing, and recycling as much as possible. As you can see, this is not shiny, it's a bit rusty. Well, I ended up getting this for free because my parents were replacing the fence in their backyard. I simply cut it into links, so then when you put together as a circle, it is large enough to circumnavigate the tree while having a nice buffer space. That way the deer can't stick their head in here and nibble at the tree. So you sure can't beat free, especially when you're saving up to have a little one. In addition to that, this is to help keep the chickens away from the root zone of the tree. With the cardboard, it's not as critical, but those chickens, they will flail all these wood chips out of here. Eventually though, our vision is to have this be a deep mulch system as much as possible, both for just keeping the carbon to nitrogen ratio balanced, but also keep it a nice area that is sanitary for the chickens.
So I mentioned earlier that we were looking back at how we used to raise our chickens in our suburban setting and seeing what we actually liked about it. And it just goes to show you that you can change your mind after you try out some different methods. So when we were living in the suburbs, we were watching all the different YouTube videos about raising your chickens and your livestock on pasture and rotationally grazing them and having them eat the fly larvae behind the cows. And we wanted to give that a try. What we discovered though was when we did have our flock of barred rock chickens and our goose following the cows, is they were slowly getting picked off by the hawks. Our cows spend most of their afternoon along the tree line. Even though we're rotationally grazing them, we have a lot of tree line. And so they're dropping most of their manure there. So if we wanted the chickens to be eating the fly larvae, they had to be along the wood line. What happened though was the hawks would sit in the trees, jump straight down, and were picking off our chickens one by one. So it wasn't safe for them to be along the wood line, so it defeated the purpose of having the chickens follow the cows. If they could only be in the center of the field when there really wasn't a whole lot of cow pies to be picking through in the center of our fields. So we moved them closer to the house, and we have one set that's in a chicken tractor that's our laying flock that's been closer to the house all along. But then our goose flock, we've been kind of moving around our garden and feeding them veggie scraps. But since we determined that we were not going to actually have them following the cows ever again, we were trying to figure out a way that could we combine the two flocks so that we can actually decrease our chores even more to only have one set of chicken chores rather than two. So there are pros and cons to each of the different ways you can raise your chickens. We have done the chicken tractor method that you can see right there with our laying flock. With our goose flock, we're using some of the Premier One netting and a chickshaw that we move around, and we do move it around the pasture that's around our house here. And then at our old house, it was a stationary coop that we did more of the deep bedding. We'd put mulch and leaves and things into the run to keep it sanitary for the chickens and keep disease and parasite pressure down. And when we were talking about some of the things that we missed about our old setup, we actually missed being able to interact with our chickens a little bit more. They're very amusing. They're fun to watch and interact and toss treats to and give them compost scraps. And when we have them in this chicken tractor, Nathan and I are fairly tall, and the entrance to it is like at our chest or lower on Nathan height, and so it's not very easy to interact with them. The door is kind of narrow to try and get like a big bucket or a tote in there to get the scraps in there. So we started dumping more and more of our food scraps that could have been eaten by the chickens in our compost pile that's right behind our house, just because it's more convenient. So with moving the chickens closer to the house and putting up a fence around them, we're able to dump pretty much straight from our back porch into their future run location. So that we'll be able to give them more scraps from our kitchen, which is a pro. But we are going to have to start working on a deep mulch method here, since we aren't going to be moving them around the pasture. So I'm currently standing in what's going to be the future chicken run. And as you can see, it's pretty dry and the grass is a little spotty. In addition to just having drought again this summer, this is grass that has never really fully rooted. We've had to reseed it the last 2 years. That's because we built our house from scratch right here, and so this is just all fill dirt. And while we've had the cows through here and the chickens through here to try to add fertility to the soil, this grass has just continued to be weaker. So we're going to start them on the grass here, but we know that the chickens are going to rip it up very quickly. And so then we're going to progress to a deep litter method, and we're probably going to use wood chips, as we do have a pretty steady supply of those available to us in our area through different tree trimming companies. So as it starts to get mucked up, we're going to start adding wood chips, and that'll be our carbon base to help out with the nitrogen that's in the chicken and goose poop. So while we think we are going to really like the system of having the chickens much closer to the house, one of the nice things about having the portable Premier One fencing is that we get to set up this as an experiment. For the next few months, we can see what we think about having the goose flock right near the house. Maybe we don't like the noise, maybe it smells more than we thought, maybe it gets in the way, I don't know. It gives us a chance to experiment with it for several months before we decide whether or not we want to invest in a more permanent fence that is taller, as the Premier One fencing is not really going to keep the deer out if they really want to nibble on our trees. But it lets us experiment here with the chickens and the goose to see if it's worth investing in a much taller fence for the stationary chicken run. So we are taking into account things that we really appreciate about the stationary coop system that we had at our old house. There were cons with that system. So we did have to clean out our coop twice a week just to keep it clean and sanitary in there and monitor parasites and mites and all that sort of thing. And one thing that we really loved about this mobile chickshaw is having the large hardware cloth on the bottom, and we don't have to clean the chicken coop very regularly. Every now and then you have to do a little bit of maintenance, but for the most part you don't have to clean it. So if we end up liking the system, we do plan on building a larger coop that can house both flocks and the goose with the larger hardwire cloth in the bottom. And that way we'll be able to move the chicken coop around the orchard area, so we can spread some of the fertility around, which is a bonus, but we also don't have to clean the coop, which is another great thing to keep the chore load down when raising our chickens. So we had a real-time change in plans here. We had a Premier One fence that we had out in the woods that our meat birds had been living in while they were growing out, and we just finished butchering the last of them the beginning of this week. So we're like, oh, well, we need to put this fence away. Why don't we just move it over here, and to start with a larger section for the goose flock, to have it more like what we want to eventually have with the full orchard. Well, it's the next morning, and as you can see behind me, the goose flock has been moved into their new orchard home where they'll be staying for the next few months at least as we evaluate this new system. Goose and the rooster have been enjoying all of the grass that's in here. We know that they will muck it up eventually, so we will be adding wood chips and other deep litter options in here to keep the muck and to bind up the nitrogen and some sort of carbon. But for now, they are enjoying the grass. Goose was talking to me when I was out harvesting the flowers, so he seems to be having a great time over here. And we look forward to seeing how well our orchard over here grows by being able to deep water them so frequently. And with that, we'll catch you next time.